Hi, I'm Brett from papercartridges.com, and several months ago I did a video on how to make the US style authentic blank cartridge for living history and reenacting. And ever since then I've gotten a lot of requests for making the Enfield blank cartridge for authentic reenacting. It's super hot here, so this is going to be a very quick video, and my ice is melting, so we got to move with a purpose here. But I'm going to go over how I make these blank cartridges again, this is for authentic living history events that have very high standards, and these cartridges will definitely meet any event guideline standards. But making them can be a little complex. The Enfield cartridge is a little different than the US cartridge. The US cartridge was a brown paper bag where you just stick the bullet and the powder in. Well, the Enfield cartridge was an integral part to actually firing the gun. So the bullet goes down the barrel with paper from the cartridge still around it. So it's a lot, not a lot, a little bit more tedious, and the original live ammunition took even more steps than we're going to do today. And the dimensions I'm going to provide for the blank ammunition are not quite the same dimensions you would use for a live cartridge, so keep that in mind. But for making these, you'll need some tools. First, you're going to need bourbon and bitters. Got that. Next, you're going to need some orphans. Normally, I have orphans make these for me, but ever since the last cholera epidemic, we've been in very short supply. So if you can't find orphans, you'll just have to do them yourself. The mandrels, you'll need several, and fortunately the common sizes that you'll need you can find on Amazon quite easily. So you'll need a 1/2 inch mandrel and then a 5/8 inch mandrel. I had, for making the live fire cartridges, I had an aluminum one custom machined for me that's bang on at 5/6/8. The 5/8 brass tube mandrels aren't quite exactly right for live fire, but for blanks, you're just fine. Paper. Historically, the English paper used was a white, fine, very, very high quality linen rag paper, which does not exist anymore today. Maybe you can go on Etsy and find a couple sheets of linen typewriter paper, and it'll cost you 30 bucks. So we have to use, tragically, we have to use wood pulp paper. And the best paper that I've found, fortunately, it's cheap enough to be used for blanks. It's Fidelity brand onion skin. It's sold on Buffalo Arms. You can find it online from a few makers. It's really, really nice 10-pound weight onion skin paper. And this is what it looks like. It's just nice and thin. You will need masking tape because we are making the later version of the Enfield cartridge, the type that would have been getting imported from England circa 1862, 1863 for the Confederate Army. So you'll need a 1/2 inch white masking tape, or just you can cut some 1/2 inch paper and glue them on with the glue stick. And finally, you need packing peanuts. It's the same biodegradable packing peanuts that I use for the Federal 58 caliber cartridge. And these do a really good job of holding the shape of what would be the bullet. So I'm going to switch the camera around, chug a little bit of bourbon here, and we'll get into making them. Okay, so I think we got everything we need here. For your paper, I forgot to mention you'll also need cardstock. This is for forming the powder cylinder. And these are the dimensions that I use. And again, these are not the dimensions for the live fire cartridge. These are for the blank. Simply not having a bullet in the cartridge means we got to do things a little bit differently. It still functions and looks the same, but obviously there's no bullet, so we got to switch things up a little bit. Here's the dimensions. It's just 2 inches by 2 3/4 inches, and I just use the cheapest cardstock that I can find. I'll cut it into these 2-inch strips, and if you're using 8.5 by 11 normal paper size, 2 3/4, you can get 4 of these out of one of the strips. Then for the white fine paper, the onion skin, don't ask me why I did it in fraction and decimal. I'm I'm a little bit into the bourbon already, so but here's your dimensions. I don't know if you can see it. It's 4 inches on top, 3.5, and then 2 3/4. But that said, the only dimension that really matters is this 3.5 here. The others can be off a little bit, and it's not going to change your cartridge. So the first thing you need to do is roll your powder cylinders. Normally this is done by orphans, but since we live in these benighted times, the 1/2-inch mandrel that I use, you'll notice that it has been thickened up slightly with some tape. And I did that to make the powder cylinder a little bit larger diameter. And the best way to figure out how much tape you need to put on your mandrel is just make them and see how they fit. So by trial and error, I've figured this out. And I've marked the appropriate spot on the mandrel with some tape for how far to put the paper. So I'll show you what I mean by all of this. So you'll take your piece of cardstock, and this is the trickiest part of the whole Enfield cartridge, is simply rolling them up. So you take the cardstock on the mandrel and you want to roll it tight. And the crucial thing is snapping this bit, snapping that edge of the cardstock down inside so that when you roll it up, you can see it is rolled up tightly around the mandrel. Then you take your onion skin paper, and you'll see that the tape here is placed so that it leaves just about maybe 1/3 of an inch protruding off the top. And then that gets rolled up. It's kind of awkward doing it here in front of me to keep it in frame. And then once it's rolled up, you stuff in the end, and that's actually kind of sloppy. You can see there's a little hole. In a live fire cartridge, this would be a no-go because that would leak powder down into contact with the bullet. For a blank, yeah, that's perfectly adequate. We'll do one more real quick. Again, snap that bit in, roll it up nice and tight. Line up your onion skin paper. I gotta keep remembering to keep it in frame. We're gonna roll that up, twist, and just press in the end. And if there's a little hole, it doesn't matter, because again, you don't have a bullet, you're gonna have a piece of styrofoam packing peanut. So once you have your powder cylinders made, historically, you did not remove the powder cylinder from the mandrel in the production process for making the ammunition. The next step, with the powder cylinder still on the mandrel, you would roll it up in another piece of paper with the bullet in here. But we can't do that with a smushy packing peanut. So we have to form the outer wrapper, and that is what you use your other, the 5/8 inch sized mandrel for. And I'm just going to use my 5/6/8 because that's what I have everything sized to. And you use the same sheet of paper, the same one that we do for the cardstock. So this is also different from the live version of the cartridge. This is simply for simplicity, for making reenactor rounds. And we're going to, this is the easiest part. You just roll it on up and stuff the end, twist and stuff the end in. On the live fire cartridges, the English-made cartridges, they were tied off at the base because the bullets came with a wooden plug. There was nothing to press them into. Domestically produced Confederate versions of the cartridge got stuffed into the base. So if you want to be just insanely hyper-authentic, feel free to tie these off. I just stuff them for convenience. Then a packing peanut goes into your outer cylinder that you made, and this is going to be your imitation bullet. And once that is in place, sometimes I use 1 packing peanut, sometimes I will use 1.5. You'll figure out how much you need to put in there to get a nice stiff simulated bullet with some trial and error. But then I take This is another mandrel, and all I've done here, again, on the live version of the cartridge, you would not remove the powder cylinder from this mandrel. But since we're making blanks, we're kind of improvising here. So I use this. This simply holds the powder cylinder so that I can compress that packing peanut in it. So the cylinder goes in and I compress that peanut until it is the length of a bullet, about an inch. After you make the first 5,000 of these, you'll know just by sight how far to compress your packing peanut. And then the last step is to take that 1/2 inch masking tape, take maybe a 2.5 inch long piece of masking tape, and that simply seals, it connects the inner and outer wrappers, and that forms your Enfield cartridge. Let's do another one real quick while we're here. So we've made our cylinder. Actually, we'll start, just for demonstration purposes, we'll do it all over, make one more of everything. So we're going to make our outer wrapper. Again, the length doesn't really matter too much. You want this 2.5-ish approximate inches. And you definitely want to leave enough here so that you can get a real good twist and lock that in, because when you press down on that packing peanut, you don't want the end to burst out. So packing peanut goes in. And then just for good measure, we will make another powder cylinder real quick. So again, tight. You want to snap that in tightly. Get our white fine or onion skin, and we will, sorry about that, roll that up nice and tight, twist it in. I guess I could have left that one on the mandrel since we're just making one complete round. And again, you notice I am supporting the base of the cartridge as I press down, and you can see that peanut getting firmer as it gets compressed. And then on goes the 1/2 inch masking tape, or if you don't have masking tape, just use a glue stick and glue a little strip of paper around it, which is how they did it historically. And there you go. So this would be charged with however much powder you want to use for your blanks. And then the tops would be twisted off. So unlike the US cartridge where they were pinched and folded, these simply get twisted down. So it's about half a twist. So when you fill it with powder, just, how am I going to do this for, for the camera? I just pinch it in, and I really don't do much of a twisting action, because if you really twist this tightly, you will rip this very thin paper. So I kind of compress it in and push it down with a very slight twist motion. And that seals absolutely completely solid. Your powder is not going anywhere when that is twisted. And there you go. That is the finished cartridge. Now, one thing I will say, I used to dip these in wax. So the historic cartridges, because again, the bullet is in here, it's a paper patched cartridge, a paper patched bullet. The lubricant went on the outside of the paper, so the lube never actually touched the bullet like it did with the US cartridge. Lube is on the paper on the outside, that goes down the barrel with the bullet. So I used to dip these in wax. Beeswax is expensive, so I was using ordinary cheap paraffin wax, like candle making wax. And I found out the hard way that if you're at an event, an authentic event, that allows you to ram your cartridges, if you are actually ramming, if you're snapping off the powder cylinder and ramming down the bullet, so to speak, with that paraffin around it, two things happen, and none of them are good. The wax, as your musket heats up from firing blanks, that paraffin will start to adhere to the walls of your barrel, But by far the worst thing that can happen, and this is the reason I stopped doing it. I can get paraffin off the rifle barrel with boiling water, but that the paraffin around the paper in the breech of your rifle sometimes will adhere in there and create a little ember. And I was getting, for the only time in my life after 15 or more years of reenacting, I was getting cook-offs. I would pour in the powder and whoosh, it would fire. And that happened 2 or 3 times. And I realize now that it never, ever happens to me, well, knock on wood, but it has not happened to me when I do not use any wax on the paper. And this is from firing blanks. When there's a real bullet in here, all of this paper goes out the barrel and it leaves nothing behind because there's 6,000 plus psi of pressure pushing the bullet out. So it's a non-issue with the live fire version of the cartridge. Obviously, if this was happening, the British would have never used this cartridge for literally 13, 14 years. If the powder kept flashing off due to the wax. But it does happen with blanks. So I do not wax my Enfield blanks anymore. If you want to dip them in wax, then by all means. But just be warned. Also, you may want to, if you want to do the English import rounds, you can get different colors. So, for instance, Ludlow. The Ludlow brothers in Birmingham were a major ammunition manufacturer, commercial manufacturer, and they sold a whole bunch of ammo to the Rebs during the Civil War. A lot of reports, even General Sherman wrote a report back saying he's finding rebel cartridges made by Ludlow out of Birmingham, England. So this is an interesting, authentic little twist you can do on your cartridges, or other Purcell-made cartridges also. But overwhelmingly, the vast majority were just plain white. Plain white paper, both Confederate and English. So English government ammunition used just a plain white gummed band, they called it. And most of the commercial manufacturers, Ely Brothers, just a plain white band. So this is by far the most common, but on occasion, it is acceptable to use some of the Ludlow labels. I just love the Ludlow label. All right, well, that just about does it for the Enfield paper cartridge for reenacting. One of these days I'll do one for making the actual live fire version of the cartridge, maybe once I hit 10,000 subscribers. But this is how to do the blanks for hyper authentic, like highest possible authenticity standards for Civil War, living history, and reenacting. But I'm Brett from Paper Cartridges, and I hope this video was useful to you. I am going to stop now and finish my whiskey because I'm sweating to death, and I'm going to turn the AC back on. But I'd appreciate a like and subscribe if this was useful to you, and I will see you next time.